The rain hadn't stopped in hours. It didn't fall, it pressed like the whole sky wanted her gone. Claire Mitchell gripped the steering wheel tight, her fingers stiff from the cold windshield wipers, screaming with each pass. The narrow mountain road ahead blurred into a ribbon of gray, winding like something alive. Her gas gauge blinked red. Again. She pulled off at the only gas station for miles, a rusted relic, with one pump and a flickering neon open sign that looked like it was lying. Boone, her golden retriever, whimpered softly, in the back seat nose against the glass. His ribs showed through his coat. She reached over and touched his fur. "I know, boy. We're almost there. I think." Claire stepped out into the rain with her hood up and her soul sagging. Everything she owned fit into 2 bags and a beat-up Subaru. It all started unraveling 2 weeks ago, the job, the apartment, the savings. One by one gone. Not in a dramatic explosion, just a slow leak until she had nothing left but the quiet hum of "You don't belong here anymore." A $200 cabin bought in a 3 a.m. haze of desperation now blinked on her phone's map like some cosmic joke. As is. Remote access. No guarantee of livability. The listing had warned bold font and all. But it had a roof. Probably. And walls. Maybe. She filled the tank with what little cash she had, then stood under the overhang and stared at the trees lining the road. Rain slipped off their branches in heavy drops. Fog licked the edges of the forest like it had teeth. Boone pressed against her leg, shivering. That was when the old man at the pump next to hers spoke. "You heading up Old Fox Hollow Road?" he asked, not looking at her. His voice was raw, like gravel grinding under boots. She hesitated. "Yeah. Cabin up there. Just bought it." He finally looked at her. His face was a canyon of age and weather. "You didn't buy it. You just claimed what got tired of waiting." She wanted to ask what he meant, but he turned away, replaced the pump, and drove off without another word. An hour later, Claire pulled off the main road onto a dirt trail that barely deserved the name. The forest swallowed her in seconds. No GPS signal, no bars, no lights, just the sound of gravel popping under her tires and the whisper of trees closing in. The gate came into view just as the road turned to mud. A rusted chain hung loosely over 2 leaning posts. A wooden sign dangled from one nail. Property of Harland Estate. Claire didn't know a Harland. Didn't want to. She unlatched the chain, pushed the gate open with a groan that sounded almost human, and drove through. Boone whined. The trail narrowed. Branches scraped the sides of the car like fingers. Her headlights caught glimpses, logs, moss roots curled like claws. Then finally, like a shadow pulling back the cabin appeared. It looked tired. The roof sagged under a thick layer of moss. The porch leaned like it had one leg shorter than the other. 2 dark windows stared out, vacant and somehow wary. A broken lantern hook swung gently beside the door. No light. No welcome. Claire parked, stepped out, and looked up at her new home. Boone barked once, soft and low. "Yeah," she whispered. "I feel it too." Inside, the air was cold and metallic, soaked in the smell of wet wood and old paper. One room, a collapsed mattress against the wall. A fireplace filled with ash and bones of logs. A table held together by one rock under its leg. The floor groaned beneath her feet like it remembered every step before hers. She lit a candle from her bag. The flame danced like it didn't want to stay. Boone curled near the door but didn't lie down. Claire lowered herself to the floor, back against the wall. Her coat dripped. Her hair stuck to her neck. She felt the weight of everything: rain, failure, expectation, all pressing down like the ceiling could collapse if she let her guard down. I didn't lose everything, she murmured to no one. I just ran out of places to put it. Boone lifted his head. Outside, the wind kicked up. Something thudded softly on the roof. Then again. And again. Not branches. Footsteps. Claire sat up straighter, held her breath. Silence. Then a creak, not from above, but beneath her. The floor just to the right of the fireplace. Boone growled low, almost a whisper of a sound. His ears pointed toward the same spot. She grabbed her flashlight, walked to the spot, knelt. The wood looked different there. Newer. A little too flat in a room full of chaos. She pressed her palm to it. Warm. She pulled back. That was enough for tonight. Morning came reluctantly. Gray light seeped in through dirt-streaked windows. The forest outside was still wrapped in fog. Claire stepped barefoot onto the porch, arms crossed tight over her chest. The air was sharp, clean. The kind of cold that made you feel awake whether you wanted to or not. The trees stood like watchers. Nothing moved. No birds. No wind. Just Boone sniffing along the side of the cabin, tail low. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "We made it." But the cabin said nothing. Not with words, with creaks, with tension in the air. With the feeling that she wasn't just moving in, she was stepping into something already in motion. Inside, she lit another candle, cleared off the table, and unpacked her bag. Blankets, one change of clothes, a tin of coffee, a knife, a map. Her eyes drifted to the corner near the hearth again. That spot, that warmth. Tomorrow she'd check. Today she needed to not lose her mind. Then Boone barked sharply. She turned, startled. He was at the door, staring out through the fog, and that's when she saw it. Just beyond the tree line, a flicker of light. Not fire, not headlights. It pulsed gentle. Too steady. Too intentional. Boone growled. Claire stepped forward, but the light vanished. Gone. She waited another hour before closing the door for the night. The candle flickered low, casting long shadows across the warped floorboards. Her eyes drifted again to the fireplace, and that patch of floor. Still warm. Still watching. Claire woke before the light. Or maybe the light just hadn't come yet. Either way, the cabin was dark and still, like it hadn't decided to wake up either. Boone was sitting alert in the same spot by the fireplace where he'd settled the night before. He hadn't moved. His tail thudded once when she stirred, but his eyes didn't leave the floor. "Good morning to you too," she whispered, reaching over to scratch behind his ears. He didn't relax. Claire rolled her stiff shoulders and sat up fully. The room hadn't changed, but it felt different. Less abandoned, more. Paused, like something was holding its place in a long-forgotten rhythm. She poured a little water into Boone's bowl and took the first step toward the hearth. The warmth she'd felt last night from that one patch of floor still clung to memory. Was it real? She had no heat source. The fireplace hadn't been used in years, judging by the layer of soot and dust. And yet, she knelt by the spot, pressed her palm flat to the wood. Cold. No warmth now, but the floorboard gave slightly under her weight. A subtle give, soft, then firm again, like something cushioned beneath. Boone whined behind her. "Okay," she muttered. "Let's find out what you're hiding." She went out to the porch and found the crowbar where she'd spotted it yesterday, half buried under a warped planter box. The metal was rusted, the handle worn smooth by hands long gone. Back inside, she fit the edge between two boards near the hearth and pressed down. The first nail came up with a sharp pop that echoed in the room more than it should have. Boone flinched. Another nail, then another. The wood groaned not like something breaking, but like something exhaling after a long time held in. She lifted the board. Beneath a shallow hollow, just deep enough to tuck something away and forget it. At first, she only saw dust and cobwebs, but then her flashlight beam caught the edge of a metal box. Tin. About the size of a shoebox. The lid was rusted shut. She pulled it out, gently laid it on the floor beside her, and ran a finger along the edge. Boone sniffed it once and backed away. "You're not usually this jumpy," she said quietly. "What do you know that I don't?" With a grunt, she wedged the crowbar under the lid and pried. The rust gave way with a long, reluctant creak, the metal splitting open like old lips opening for the first time in decades. Inside were papers, brittle yellowed edges curled. A birth certificate. Letters, some folded tight, some opened and refolded. Receipts from stores that no longer existed. At the very bottom, a small tarnished key wrapped in faded blue cloth. She picked it up. It was surprisingly cold, even though the rest of the box felt room temperature. Her thumb brushed over the cloth, and for a second she felt the barest prickle goosebumps up her arm, as if the air shifted around her. Then she found the locket. Gold dulled with age, the hinges stiff. She opened it carefully. 2 tiny portraits inside. The woman from the photo above the fireplace. The same stiff smile, same strange tension behind the eyes. And next to her, a man, broad-shouldered, gentle-eyed, his hand resting on her shoulder in the picture. He looked like someone who used to laugh more. She held it in her palm and closed her eyes. "Who were you? What happened here?" A gust of wind shoved at the cabin walls. The front door rattled in its frame. Claire startled back to her feet. The candle flickered, and for just a second, the shadows on the wall looked like they were leaning closer. She shook herself. It's just wind. Wind and creaky floorboards. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. She spent the next few hours reading what she could from the box. The birth certificate belonged to a girl, Eliza Wren, born in 1977, the daughter of Harland and Margaret Wren. Claire set the certificate beside the locket and picked up one of the letters. It was addressed simply to whoever finds this. The handwriting was elegant, controlled like someone used to keeping her emotions behind fences. She didn't open that one. Not yet. Instead, she stood and walked slowly around the room. The candle on the table still flickered, though no draft reached it. Boone was pacing now, nose low to the floor, back legs tense. Claire watched him. That's when she noticed it. The silence wasn't normal. It wasn't peaceful or natural like the quiet in a church or in the woods after snow. It was pressurized, like a room waiting for something to break. She whispered the thought out loud before she could stop herself. Some silences don't mean peace. They mean something's holding its breath. And just like that, the air seemed to shift again. The candle guttered. Boone barked once, short and sharp. Then he ran to the window. Claire followed and froze. Out beyond the trees, through the thick mist, a light flickered again. Same as last night. Not fire, not flashlight. Just presence. It hovered in the trees. Not close, not far. Pulsing once, then gone. Claire didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay on the floor wrapped in 2 blankets, the locket clutched in her palm, like it could anchor her to something real. Boone lay pressed against her legs. He didn't move all night. She dreamed of creaks that whispered, of fog with fingers, of a woman's voice saying her name from somewhere just outside the window. In the morning, the world looked pale and strange. She opened the cabin door to find that the fog hadn't lifted. It had thickened, swallowing the porch, the trees, even parts of the yard. Boone growled low and stepped behind her legs. Claire stayed in the doorway. Then a shape moved at the end of the trail. Not light this time. A person. A man. He didn't come closer. Just stood there, hat low, shoulders hunched, as if unsure whether to knock or run. Claire squinted into the fog, heart thudding. Then the man turned and walked away without a word, vanishing into the trees. Not a dream. Not a memory. Someone had been watching the cabin. Or maybe watching her. She closed the door slowly and sat down at the table, picked up the letter again. To whoever finds this. She opened it and started reading. Boone barked twice, sharp, short. Not frantic, just certain. Claire stood up from the table, where the letter still lay unfolded, her hand still resting on the faded paper. Her knees cracked as she moved toward the window. Outside, a green pickup truck crawled up the muddy trail like it knew every bump, every route. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't fast. It looked like something built before GPS and still loyal to paper maps. The engine cut out with a sputter. A man stepped down from the driver's side. He was tall, weather-worn, maybe mid-60s, dressed in a beat-up canvas jacket with jeans that looked broken in by 1,000 quiet mornings. A knit cap covered most of his gray hair. He had a small box under one arm and a canvas satchel over his shoulder. He didn't approach immediately, just stood at the edge of the porch, squinting up at the cabin, like he was seeing someone again after a long time apart. Boone stood at the door, tail stiff, head tilted, not barking, just waiting. Claire opened the door slowly. "You lost?" she asked. The man smiled, just barely. "Wouldn't be the first time. But not today." He took a few steps closer, eyes flicking toward Boone, then back to her. "Name's Nate Bishop. I used to work this route for the county post office. Still do, kinda. No one fired me. I just kept going." Claire nodded, not sure what to say yet. Nate looked at the porch, then the roofline. "You're staying here?" "Yeah," she said cautiously. "Won the place in an online auction. Real glamorous story." "Online," he repeated like it was a foreign word. "That explains it." "Explains what?" He tapped the porch rail gently. "This place doesn't usually get visitors. Not ones who stay, anyhow." Boone let out a quiet whine and brushed past Claire to sniff Nate's boots. Nate reached down and gave him a brief pat, eyes never leaving Claire's. "You the caretaker, then?" She blinked. "I guess I don't know what I am here yet." "That's all right," he said. "The house will tell you." He held out the small cardboard box. Mail delivery. Years late. Claire took it. Inside was a bundle of old letters, rubber-banded and yellowed. Some were addressed to Margaret Wren. A few had no address at all, just names. Others had been marked "Return to Sender." "I keep the strays," Nate said, "just in case someone comes back for them. Habit's a kind of loyalty." Claire smiled despite herself. "That's a good line." Not a line. Just true. He shifted the satchel on his shoulder. "Mind if I sit a spell?" She stepped aside. Nate walked into the cabin like someone paying respects, slow and quiet eyes taking in everything. The fireplace, the floorboards, the tilted table. Claire poured 2 mugs of instant coffee, the only kind she had. She handed him one, watching him sip and nod, as if to say it passed. "I found a box under the floor," she said after a minute. "Letters, papers, tapes. Belonged to Margaret and Harland." Nate didn't react. "Sounds like you found more than most ever do." "You knew them?" He leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "Met Harland a few times. Margaret more often. She used to walk into town once a week for sugar and thread. Quiet type, but sharp. Eyes like someone always listening to something just behind your words. And Harland kind when he could be. Hurt when he couldn't. Carved birds from driftwood. Sold 'em for $5 a piece to tourists who wanted to buy a story and a souvenir." Claire nodded. She'd seen his name on the property sign and in the documents. She hadn't let herself imagine what kind of man he was until now. "They lost a daughter, didn't they?" Nate paused. "Eliza. Pretty little thing. Never saw her much. Heard she was sensitive." Claire turned the locket in her hand, thumb tracing the worn edge. "What happened to them officially vanished during the big storm in '79. Flood came fast. Washed out part of the Ridge Road. Folks assumed the worst. And unofficially—" He looked at her, not unkind. "You already know unofficially, don't you?" Claire thought of the tapes. Of Margaret's voice saying we didn't vanish, we walked into it. Thought of the light in the woods that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Something happened," she said. "Something more." Nate didn't press. Just sipped his coffee. Cabins always had stories. Some folks say it's the mountain like it remembers things too long. Some say it's the fog. Others say it's just grief with nowhere to go. "That's poetic," she muttered. He grinned. "I used to date a librarian." Boone barked once, drawing their attention. His nose was pressed to the window again. The light flickered beyond the tree line, brief, faint, pulsing once. Nate watched it without blinking. "Still showing up," he murmured. Claire turned to him. "You've seen it before," he nodded. "More times than I can count. Sometimes it shows up for people who ain't ready. Sometimes it shows up and no one even sees it. But it always comes back." She didn't know what to say to that. "Think I'm crazy?" She shook her head. "No. I think you're the first person who hasn't made me feel like I'm losing it." He set the empty mug on the table. "This house don't need people who want to own it. Just people who'll listen." Claire looked around. At the candle, the tapes, the names she hadn't spoken aloud yet. "I'm listening," she said. Nate gave a small nod. "Then it might just tell you the rest." He pulled a small wrapped bundle from his bag. "For the record player. You'll need it when you find the second tape." Claire froze. "How did you—" But he was already standing. "Some folks don't need a uniform to keep showing up," he said, stretching his back. "Sometimes you just keep carrying the message long after the office closes." She walked with him to the porch. "You'll see it again," he said, stepping off into the gravel. "That light. Don't chase it. Just let it do what it came to do." "And what's that?" He smiled again. "That's between you and the mountain." Then he was gone. Truck rumbling down the trail like it belonged there more than she did. Claire spent the rest of the day sorting the letters. Some were banal groceries, church notices, newspaper clippings. But others— one was addressed to the next woman here. That one she set aside. She lit the candle early, needing the flame even before the sun dipped low. Boone curled up by the hearth again. Same spot. Same tension. The silence settled around them, heavy but no longer foreign. As the light outside faded, she felt something she hadn't in days. Not peace, but presence. Boone was gone. Claire had only turned her back for a second to toss another log into the cold fireplace to adjust the candle, but the door creaked open, and Boone had bolted into the dark like something had pulled him. Not chased, not scared, drawn. She snatched her flashlight and ran after him barefoot across the warped porch, the wood slick with rain. Cold air hit her like a wave. Her breath clouded the air, and the fog swallowed her in a few steps. The beam of her flashlight wobbled as she moved, slicing through white mist, catching glimpses of wet leaves, pine needles, the curve of the trail down toward the creek. She called his name, voice tight. Boone, no answer. Branches scratched her arms as she pushed forward. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears louder than her footsteps. Somewhere deep in the fog, a shape flickered low to the ground, moving fast. She followed. Down the slope, across the path. Mud sucked at her feet, each step heavy. Then the glow appeared. Not fire. Fire flickers. Fire dances. Fire burns. This didn't. It pulsed slow and soft, steady like breath. A pale light glowing between the trees just above the forest floor, shifting like mist had learned how to shine. Claire froze. Her flashlight dimmed for a second, though the batteries were new. Boone's barking echoed again, urgent, but not panicked. It came from the direction of the light. Claire hesitated, then stepped forward. The light didn't run. It didn't lure. It waited. She followed it past the split in the trail, down to where the creek carved through the forest like an old scar. The water glistened in the pale glow, silver blue under the light. Boone's paw prints were scattered in the mud, leading toward a bend she hadn't noticed before, hidden by overgrowth and ferns. Boone, she called again, softer now. A rustle, then a bark. He appeared from the underbrush, tail raised muddy and wide-eyed. Not scared, energized. He ran to her, then back toward the creek bend, then back to her again, whimpering, urging her. Claire followed. Behind the curtain of ferns, Boone had uncovered something in the earth. A square outline of stone half swallowed by moss and time. In the center, a thick wooden hatch set with an iron ring. She knelt, brushed aside the wet leaves. Her fingers found the ring slick with rust and cold. The wood was marked, barely visible in the flashlight's beam. A letter carved into it. Not clean, but deliberate. Margaret. She gripped the iron ring and pulled. The hatch resisted at first, stuck in place by years of silence. Then it gave with a groan, exhaling a breath of stale air, damp wood, old apples, something faintly sweet and gone. A narrow staircase descended into the dark. Boone didn't go first. He waited. Claire stuck the flashlight between her teeth, gripped the walls on either side, and climbed down. "Okay, easy," she muttered through the plastic. Easy. The cellar was small, square. The air was heavier here, pressed into place. Shelves lined the walls, jars of preserves long turned to shadows, a pair of children's rain boots, a folded quilt. Everything dusted in age, but organized. Loved, even. A shovel leaned in one corner, its handle worn smooth. In the far wall, just above eye level, was a panel. Square, carved to fit flush against the stone. A modest brass lock the size of a button sat in the center. Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out the small silver key, wrapped in blue cloth, the one she'd found in the tin box under the floor. She hesitated. Something in her stomach tightened. Like turning this key would shift something not just in the room, but in the timeline of this place. Still, she slid it in. The lock clicked softly. The panel swung inward on silent hinges to reveal a shallow niche. Inside a metal strongbox, its latch dulled with time. A stack of notebooks tied with twine. A cassette recorder. 3 tapes, each wrapped in wax paper. Claire sat on the cellar steps, the cold biting through her jeans, and lifted the topmost tape. Written in elegant script for whoever comes, 1 of 3. She clicked it into the recorder and pressed play. The plastic shifted. Then a voice, neither old nor young, the voice of someone who had buried too much to speak lightly. Controlled, gentle, tired. If you're listening, the voice said, then we didn't come back the way we hoped. Claire stared at the floor. My name is Margaret Wren. The cabin above you is mine. Was a home once for me, for Harland, and for our daughter Eliza. The voice paused. A soft inhale. You think we vanished in a storm. That's what the paper said. It needed a word. But we didn't vanish. We split. Claire felt a chill crawl up her spine. Boone whined and pressed close. Margaret's voice continued. The storm didn't take us. We walked into it. Because the light promised something. After Eliza, I had darkness in me. The kind you forget you're carrying until someone asks how you are, and you lie so easily it scares you. Claire closed her eyes. I saw the light first, Margaret whispered. Called it foxfire. Trick eyes. God, when I was desperate. But it called her too. Eliza. Wonder is a door. It doesn't care if you're ready. The tape crackled. One night she followed it. We thought we'd find her. Bring her home. But we didn't understand. Some things call you with love but don't know how to give it. Another pause. So we sealed the root cellar. Swore we'd never listen again. But we drifted. Harlan couldn't stop carving. I couldn't stop hearing her name in the trees. Claire realized she was crying. She didn't know when it started. The tape hissed at the end. No closing. No answer. Just breath. Boone rested his head on her knee. She pressed stop, slid the first notebook from the stack, and opened to the first page. There was no title, just a single sentence written in pencil. This place was never haunted. It was just grieving. She climbed out of the cellar into the thick quiet of the trees. The glow was gone. Fog still clung to the trunks, but the weight had shifted. She didn't know what to call it, respect maybe, or recognition. Back inside the cabin, she placed the tape recorder on the table and lit another candle. The shadows moved, but not like before. She looked at Boone. I think we're not the first people to run out of places to go. He wagged his tail once. She gathered the notebook, the map, the key. Everything Margaret left behind wasn't just memory. It was invitation. Claire spent the next morning pacing the cabin floor, the notebook open on the table, her finger tracing the map over and over again. The hand-drawn lines were uneven, but the details were careful pine clusters, the bend in the creek, a crooked tree marked with an X, and at the very bottom a single note, Split Creek, where the water remembers what we don't. Boone lay near the hearth, his head resting on the floor, but eyes tracking her as she moved. He hadn't barked again since the night before. It was like even he knew something sacred had shifted. Claire rubbed her temple. Margaret's voice still echoed in her head. We didn't vanish. We split. not just from the world, but from each other, from themselves. She turned back to the small metal box from the cellar. It sat in the middle of the table unlocked, now its contents carefully laid out, a deed with Margaret's name faded, savings bonds, letters never sent, and the second tape. Claire hadn't played it yet. She wasn't sure she was ready. Instead, she opened the notebook again and flipped to the page Margaret had marked page 37. The ink was faded but clear. A rough sketch of two rocks side by side with an arrow pointing down between them. Beneath it, tin. Photographs. Summer before the silence. Claire traced the words. She had to find it. By late afternoon, the fog had thinned. Sunlight spilled in strips through the trees, sharp and quiet. Claire packed a small satchel water, the notebook, the locket, and set out with Boone trotting just ahead. The forest felt different today. Not safer, but open. Like it had been holding its breath for years and had finally exhaled. The path to Split Creek was rough, but Margaret's map was true. Claire counted the old sycamores past the fallen fence and found the ridge where the creek forked into two narrow streams. There, where the ground dipped, were the stones. Two large rocks side by side. Unmoving. Waiting. Boone circled the area tail high. Claire knelt and began to dig with her hands, pushing aside moss and wet leaves. The dirt was packed but loose enough to move. Boone joined in his front paws, flinging clumps of earth. Then metal. She paused, breath caught. A tin box wrapped in what used to be oilcloth, rust-stained and soft with age. She brushed off the mud and carefully opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens, maybe more. Curl-edged, some stuck together from moisture. She peeled them apart gently, her fingers shaking. A tire swing hanging from a crooked tree, a cabin porch freshly painted, a man squinting at the camera hammer in hand. Margaret. And the child. Claire stopped at that one. The girl couldn't have been more than 2. Her floppy sun hat was askew, one strap falling across her cheek. She clung to Margaret's dress, one tiny hand twisted in the fabric. The photo was creased down the middle, but the joy on Margaret's face cut through the damage. It wasn't the forced smile from the fireplace photo. This one was real. Claire let herself cry, not for the sadness, but for the presence of something once whole. They weren't ghosts, not yet. They had lived here, laughed here, dreamed here. She looked up at the creek, listening to the steady murmur of the split waters. The right branch curved around rocks with a lazy bend. The left cut sharper, faster, like it had somewhere to be. 2 paths, 1 choice. She remembered Margaret's words from the first tape. The storm didn't take us. We walked into it. Not because they were lost, because they hoped to be found. Claire stayed by the creek until the sun lowered and the shadows returned. She packed the photographs carefully into her satchel and made her way back to the cabin. Her boots soaked through, Boone never straying far from her side. Inside, she lit a candle and set the tin box on the table. The room felt warmer now, not because of the fire, but because the silence no longer felt abandoned. She stared at the tape recorder for a long time, then reached out and slid in the second tape. She pressed play. The voice returned. Margaret's voice, softer this time, tired. "Little bird," she said. Claire closed her eyes. "If you're my girl or if you're just someone else's, I'll speak to you as if you were mine." The recorder clicked softly as the tape turned. The box has papers to make the world less hungry. Take what you need. Leave what you can. Claire stared at the stack of bonds. She hadn't even looked at the amounts yet. It hadn't felt right. But now, with those words less hungry, she began to understand. "There's a map," Margaret continued. "Notebook, 3-page 37. Stones and lichen, and a tin buried near the split creek. Photographs inside. The only ones I could bear." Claire looked at the photos she'd just returned to. "I couldn't carry them with me. Too much hope in them. And hope's a heavy thing when you're walking into a storm." The silence on the tape stretched. "Then tell Harland the light wasn't holy or evil, just a weather that lives here. Like owls. Like grief. It didn't want us, it just was." Claire leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table forehead in her palms. "Tell him we tried to choose wonder. And stay." A pause. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "Tell a good dog he did his job." Claire sobbed. Boone stirred from across the room, lifted his head and came to her. Laid his head on her lap without a sound. She stroked his fur, tears dripping onto his back. They stayed like that until the tape reached its end, soft click, no final word. That night the candle burned slower. The wind outside didn't howl. It whispered. Claire stayed at the table, sorting the photos, folding the letter from the strongbox, and rereading the deed. The cabin wasn't just shelter anymore. It was witness. The next step was obvious now. The recorder still sat open, waiting for the third tape. But there were more names to learn, more questions still buried. And someone in the town, someone else, had known Margaret and Harland. Had seen what the storm didn't wash away. It was time to find them. Claire hadn't driven into town since the day she first arrived. The gas station on the edge of the county line didn't count. That was the border between before and after. This was different. This was choosing to step into the lives of people who might remember more than she wanted to hear. Boone sat in the back seat, chin resting on the window tail, thudding softly, every time she glanced at him in the rear view. The road wound in slow arcs, and fog clung to the mountains like it had nowhere better to be. She passed a field of rusting tractors, a church sign missing half its letters, and finally, a crooked hand-painted sign that read, "Knox Supply since 1965. If we don't have it, you don't need it." The parking lot was gravel, nearly empty. A single white pickup idled near the loading dock. Claire parked near the entrance, stepped out, and paused. The building looked like it had been added to in pieces, clapboard nailed over concrete windows, mismatched a porch roof that dipped in the middle. The screen door creaked as she opened it. Inside, the place smelled like old wood motor oil and lavender. An odd mix, but somehow right. A counter ran along the left wall with a bell perched next to an ancient register. Wooden shelves lined the room, stacked with everything from canning jars to shotgun shells to 3 kinds of thread no one had manufactured in 20 years. Claire stepped inside. "Hello?" A voice floated from behind a beaded curtain in the back. "Be right with you." She walked to the counter, her eyes catching on a faded corkboard full of yellowed photos, people holding up fish kids in Halloween costumes, and one photo that made her freeze. Margaret Wren. Younger. Smiling. Her hair tied back with a red ribbon. Standing in front of the same cabin Claire now called home. A woman pushed through the curtain just then. She was short, maybe 75, with wiry white hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to lift her entire face. Her eyes were sharp blue-gray and narrowed the second they landed on Claire. "You're not from here," the woman said. Not a question. "No, ma'am." The woman didn't blink. "You're the one at the Wren place." Claire nodded. "Just moved in, sort of." The woman studied her a second longer, then gave a single nod. and came around the counter, moving with the stiff grace of someone who knew every creak in the floorboards. "Name's Mabel Knox. You need supplies, tools, or truth, I might have all three. Just depends which you came looking for." Claire blinked. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet." Mabel picked up a small crate and began unpacking it. "No one ever is. That cabin's like a mirror. Shows you what you ain't ready to face until you're already staring at it." Boone patted in, then tail-wagging tongue lolling out. Mabel looked at him and stiffened. "Well, I'll be—" Claire frowned. "You okay?" "That dog," Mabel murmured. "He's seen it." "Foglight." Claire felt her blood run cold. "You know about it," Mabel laughed once, dry and low. "Child, I named it." She set the box down with a sigh and leaned on the counter. "Back in '79, the sheriff told us Margaret and Harland got washed out. Creek jumped the banks, took the bridge. But you ask anyone with a spine and a memory, we'll tell you different." Claire waited. "They followed it," Mabel said. "That light, that soft, quiet beckoning. It's not cruel, it's just unfinished. It's what grief looks like when it doesn't know where to go." Claire swallowed. "I've seen it." "So has Boone." Mabel's eyes flicked to the dog. "And you came back." "We had to. Boone led me to a hidden cellar. There were tapes, notes, letters. Margaret, she left everything." Mabel crossed herself without thinking. "Then it's starting again. What is—" The old woman leaned closer. "The mountain doesn't forget, honey, but sometimes it forgives. And when it does, it chooses someone to carry the memory. Not everyone gets that job." Claire shifted her weight. "I didn't ask for it." "None of them do," Mabel said, then pointed to the locket around Claire's neck. "That hers?" Claire nodded slowly. "You hear her voice?" Claire hesitated. "Yes." "On tape." Mabel shook her head. "No, I mean hear her. In the wind. In the fog. When the trees don't move but still speak." Claire didn't answer. Not directly. But the weight behind her silence said enough. Mabel turned and walked behind the counter, reaching under a loose floorboard and pulling out a small cloth-wrapped parcel. She handed it to Claire. "What is this something I've held on to for too long?" "Belonged to Margaret. She left it here the week before the storm. Told me not to open it unless someone came asking with Boone's eyes." Claire opened it gently. Inside was a small, carved wooden charm, shaped like a bird mid-flight. Smooth, worn by time. "She said it was meant to hang by the door," Mabel added. "Said it would know when someone needed to come in." Claire's voice cracked. "She knew someone else would come, she hoped," Mabel said. "There's a difference." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mabel reached under the counter again and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "There's a boy you should talk to. Toby Crane. His daddy was one of the last to see the light before he disappeared." Claire took the note. "Where can I find him? Fixes tires behind the old post office. Tall, quiet. Don't spook him." Claire nodded. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Mabel said softly, "One more thing." Claire looked back. "If you see your name in the mist," Mabel said, "don't answer." Claire's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because the mountain already knows it. But it ain't asking for you. It's asking through you." Back at the cabin, the fog was already rolling back in. Boone jumped from the car before it fully stopped trotting ahead toward the porch like he'd been gone too long. Claire followed the bird charm in her hand. She hung it on the old lantern hook beside the door. It didn't chime, didn't swing, but it felt right. That night the fog pressed close to the windows, and somewhere in it Claire thought she saw movement. Not light. A figure, watching. The sound came just after midnight. Not loud, not sharp, but persistent. Boone stood by the fireplace, head cocked, his nails ticking softly on the warped floorboards as he paced the same 3 feet he'd walked the night before. Claire sat up from the mattress near the window, blankets tangled around her legs, her pulse quickening. She knew that sound now. Not rats, not the wind. It was the groan of old wood shifting over something it didn't want found. Claire grabbed the flashlight and the crowbar, her breath already fogging in the cold air. Boone moved aside as she knelt near the hearth. The floorboards here were slightly newer, slightly misaligned, as if someone had replaced them without wanting to draw attention. She slid the crowbar into the seam. Pried. Nails resisted. Then gave. The wood lifted with a tired sigh. Below it, not a hollow like before, but stairs. A narrow shaft leading down into pitch darkness. Stone walls lined in rough brick. Not the root cellar. Something deeper. Older. Boone sniffed the edge tail stiff. He didn't back away, but he didn't lead this time. Claire aimed the flashlight down the steps. Guess it's my turn. She descended carefully, the air growing colder with each step. The scent of dust, damp cloth, and rusted metal filled her nose. At the bottom, the beam cut across another room, squarer, smaller than the cellar under the yard. Shelves covered the back wall, cluttered with jars, boxes, and a faded red lantern. A single table sat in the center, covered with a dusty cloth. She pulled it back. A tin strongbox, a folded stack of notebooks, and a cassette recorder identical to the one upstairs, but this one had a tape already inside. Claire swallowed hard and opened the strongbox. Inside, wrapped in oilskin and string, were 3 envelopes. To the sheriff, to Reverend Ruth, to Harland. If he forgives me. Underneath, carefully folded, was a cloth pouch tied with frayed ribbon. Inside, handcrafted jewelry beads, small polished stones, a thin silver chain with a carved charm. And beneath that, like an afterthought, or a lifeline, a fan of U.S. savings bonds, the edges yellowed but intact. Claire sat down on the step, the strongbox open in her lap. Everything Margaret had hidden: money letters, family heirlooms. It wasn't just storage. It was testimony. Boone stood on the last step above her, watching. Claire wiped her hands on her jeans and pressed play on the recorder. A soft whir. Then Margaret's voice. "If you're listening," she began, "you've found what I couldn't leave in the open. We told ourselves this was just for safety. But it wasn't. It was shame." The room didn't echo. It absorbed the words like a sponge. We buried the truth twice, once by our hands and once by our hearts, hoping time would forget what we couldn't carry. Claire closed her eyes. I couldn't carry Eliza's room after she was gone. I couldn't carry Harlan's silence, so I built this room. I filled it with what didn't fit upstairs, things too heavy for daylight. The tape clicked softly as it turned. The bonds, they're real. They were meant for her college. When we stopped speaking her name out loud, we stopped spending them. Felt wrong to use them for anything else. Claire bit her lip hard. You can have them. Use them. If you've made it here, you need them more than I do. But the letters read them carefully. especially Harlan's. There was a long pause. No sound but the low hum of tape spooling. Then a whisper. I never meant to stay angry. But love turned inward becomes blame, and we blamed everything but the light. The tape clicked to an end. Claire sat still, eyes wet, the box in her lap, like a heart that had finally been opened. Back upstairs, she spread everything out on the table. The light outside had returned, soft glowing just past the tree line. It didn't flicker. It didn't move. It waited. Claire didn't go to it. Instead, she picked up the envelope addressed to Harlan. She didn't open it yet. Something told her it wasn't hers to read. But she held it for a long time, the paper trembling slightly between her fingers. She lit a new candle. Boone lay down beside her chair, sighing like a man twice his age. Then the scratching came. Not inside. At the door. Claire's heart stuttered. She stood slowly, candle in one hand, the other tightening around the letter. The door creaked as she opened it. But no one was there. Just a small object on the porch, mud-caked open. The locket. The same one she wore now around her neck. Only this one was empty. No pictures inside. Claire's mouth went dry. She looked up into the trees just in time to see the light flicker and vanish, like an eye closing. Boone let out a low whine behind her. She knelt to pick up the locket. It was hers, the exact one. But she hadn't taken it off. She stepped back inside, shut the door, and leaned against it, chest heaving. Something had returned it, or something had taken it and left it behind like a calling card. She placed it next to the other belongings, her hand trembling, then turned to Boone. I think there's still more, she whispered. Still something waiting. Boone didn't bark. He just watched her with those dark eyes, still and solemn, as if he already knew. The next morning, Claire took inventory. 3 tapes, 2 played, 1 untouched. Letters, bonds, jewelry, the locket. She placed the second recorder on the table and labeled it Room Below. There was too much for one person. But maybe not too much for one person at a time. She folded the note to Reverend Ruth and tucked it in an envelope with the deed copy. She wasn't ready to send it yet, but soon. Then she opened the third notebook from the cellar. Inside, maps, grocery lists, tiny sketches of flowers. And on page 42, a name scribbled in the margin, Toby Crane. Saw it too. Heard the trees say, "Come home." Claire traced the name with her finger. She remembered what Mabel said. Toby's father vanished chasing the light. Maybe it was time to find the boy who'd grown up with that shadow. If you see your name in the mist, don't answer. Claire found the tire shop behind the old post office, just like Mabel had said. The paint on the sign had peeled away until only the word Crane remained like a whisper. Dust rose in curls as she pulled into the gravel lot, Boone standing alert in the passenger seat, tail still but ears twitching. The sun was sharp today, unfiltered and almost too honest. It made the ghost stories feel far away, but Claire knew better now. The light could be just as dangerous when it pretended to be ordinary. A tall man in his late 20s leaned against a rusted truck frame, grease on his hands, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His dark hair was shaved on the sides, curls tucked under a backward cap. He watched her without blinking as she stepped out of the car. "You Toby?" she asked. He nodded, exhaled smoke. "Who wants to know Claire?" "I'm staying at the Wren cabin." That made him move. Just slightly. His head tilted. Didn't think anyone had the guts. "I didn't either," she said. "At first." Boone stepped out and sniffed the air. Toby looked down at him, then back up at Claire. That the dog Mabel keeps talking about, I think so. Looks like he knows things. Claire nodded. He does. That's why I'm here. I heard you might too. Toby didn't respond right away. He tossed the cigarette into a bucket of water, then wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward the back of the shop. Come on, he said. Claire followed. The office was tiny, just a desk, a mini fridge, and walls lined with shelves full of tools and old radio parts. He pulled a chair from the corner and motioned for her to sit. Then he opened a drawer and took out a box of cassette tapes. Claire felt her breath hitch. He noticed. You heard him too, Margaret, she said. She left tapes, journals, a map. Toby sat back and looked at her like he was seeing someone from a half-remembered dream. My dad saw it, he said. The light. Right before he disappeared. He left me one of these. Wouldn't say much. Just said it had called him once. Said if it called again, he'd answer. And then one night he was gone. Claire reached into her bag and took out the third tape Margaret had left. She placed it on the table between them. Toby stared at it. She finished the story, not yet. But I think she was trying to, and I think you're part of it. He looked away, jaw tight. They said he ran, left town, took off. But I know better. Claire waited. Finally, he said, he started talking to the fog, whispering at it. Said it knew his name. That he could almost see mine in it too. Claire felt her stomach flip. If you see your name in the mist, don't answer, she quoted. Toby looked at her startled. Where did you hear that, Mabel? Last night. He nodded slowly. Yeah. That tracks. She leaned forward. I think whatever this is, this light, this fog, this knowing it doesn't just take, it leaves things behind. Letters, notebooks, names, you, me. He rubbed his face. You think it wants to be understood? Claire shrugged. I think it wants witnesses. He looked at the tape again, then stood, walked to a shelf and pulled down a cassette player. Let's listen together, he said. If it starts calling our names, we stop. She nodded. He pressed play. Margaret's voice was thin, older. This is the last of me, she said. I've left enough pieces. If you've gathered them, thank you. She paused. The light came again last night. I didn't go, but I stood at the door, and I felt it remembering me. Toby glanced at Claire, his eyes wide. Margaret continued, If you're hearing this, I want you to know, we weren't taken. We were chosen. But we didn't understand what for. Maybe you do, maybe that's the whole point. The tape crackled. Tell your stories. Speak the names. Leave the lights on. If someone knocks, answer. But only if they come without the fog. A pause. And if you see your name in the mist, don't answer. Not because it's evil, but because it's not finished yet. Click. Silence. Toby exhaled slowly. She knew more than any of us. Claire nodded. She knew it wasn't about fear. It was about memory. He stood. I want to see the cabin. Claire smiled. Yeah. I think it's time. Boone barked once, sharp and ready. They drove the mountain road in near silence. The trees cast long shadows across the road, and the wind pressed like a hush against the windows. Toby kept looking out like he expected something to appear in the corner of his vision. When they pulled into the cabin's drive, Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. The fog was already waiting, coiled like smoke at the edge of the trees. Toby stepped out slowly, eyes narrowing. It feels different. Claire didn't speak. She was staring ahead. There, near the porch, stood a figure. Small, barefoot, still. A girl, smiling. Boone didn't bark, and the locket around Claire's neck began to hum. If she's still singing, then the mountain is still listening. The humming grew louder. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It didn't vibrate in the air, it vibrated in Claire's bones, like a memory she didn't recognize but still knew how to feel. The girl on the porch didn't move. She just watched as if waiting for permission to exist. Boone stayed by Claire's side, growling low, not hostile, not afraid. Alert, protective. Toby stepped forward, but Claire held out a hand. Wait. The girl looked no older than 10. Dirty feet, pale dress, dark hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were too old, too still. Her hands stayed at her sides, fingers twitching slightly like a marionette between cues. She's not real, Toby whispered. Claire shook her head. She's real enough, just not alive the way we are. The locket against her chest thrummed once more, then fell silent. Claire took a cautious step forward. The girl didn't move, just watched. Do you know my name? Claire asked softly. The girl tilted her head, then pointed at Boone. Boone's ears perked. He whined, took one tentative step forward, then sat. Claire followed slowly. When she reached the porch, the girl finally moved, just a small gesture. She lifted one arm and pointed toward the trees. Claire turned her head, following the direction. Nothing. Just fog and pine. When she looked back, the girl was gone. Claire gasped. Boone jumped to his feet, growling. Toby ran to the porch. Where did she go? Claire shook her head. Her pulse thundered. She didn't run, she faded. Toby stepped back, rubbing his arms. I've seen deer vanish into the woods, but that Claire finished for him. That wasn't the woods taking her. That was something else. She walked toward where the girl had pointed. Boone stayed close. Toby hesitated, then followed. 10 steps into the trees, the air changed. It got colder, not the chill of weather, but the stillness of memory. The trees felt older, tighter, as if standing vigil. A clearing opened like a wound in the forest. At its center, a stone, not a grave marker, something older. Round, smooth, with a spiral etched into the center. Claire stepped into the clearing. The spiral pulsed faintly under the fog. Toby stopped at the edge. That's not natural. Neither's this whole mountain, Claire said, but it still keeps its secrets. Boone sniffed the air, then lay down at the base of the stone as if guarding it. Claire knelt beside him. As her hand touched the spiral, the humming returned, this time in her head. Words rose behind her eyes. She sees what we lost. She listens. She gasped and fell backward. Toby caught her. What happened? She blinked. A voice. Not mine. Not human. Did it say something? Yes. It said, I see what they lost. That I listen. Toby looked around the clearing. This is a memory pit. My grandmother used to talk about places like this, where grief settles, where the veil's thinnest. Claire looked at him. Then why did the girl point us here? He shook his head. Maybe because it's where it began, or where it ended. She turned back to the stone. No, this is a midpoint, a door, not the end. She stood, took one last look at the spiral, and turned back. Inside the cabin, the air felt heavier, like it had inhaled and was holding its breath. Claire lit a lantern. Toby sat at the table flipping through one of Margaret's notebooks. "This spiral's here," he said, pointing. "Over and over. It's in the margins, on the cellar map, even in her sketches of the dog." Claire leaned over. Margaret knew this place mattered. Boone stood by the door, then barked once. Claire looked up. "He wants us outside." They followed Boone to the back of the cabin, past the woodpile to the edge of the slope that dropped toward the creek. A tree had fallen there last winter. Claire remembered it blocking her first path up the hill. Now the trunk was hollow. Boone pawed at its base. Inside, a bundle, wrapped in flannel twine knotted carefully. Claire pulled it out, heart racing. Toby helped untie it. Inside were photographs. Dozens. Faded, some water-damaged, but still visible. Margaret. Harland. The girl. Claire froze. "That's her. That's the girl from the porch." Toby stared. "No. That's Eliza. Harland's daughter. Margaret's stepchild. She died in the flood." Claire shook her head. "No. She didn't die. She's here, or part of her is." They spread the photos on the grass. One showed Eliza at the stone spiral, fingers pressed to it. Another her standing beside Boone. Younger, yes, but unmistakable. "This dog's older than time," Toby muttered. Claire whispered, "Or exactly as old as we need him to be." They took the bundle inside. Claire tucked the photographs into the notebook. The candle flickered. Toby looked at her. "Why are we seeing her now?" "Because we're ready to listen. And maybe she's ready to speak." "What if she wants something?" Claire met his eyes. "Then we give it. If we can." Boone stood again, walked to the cellar door. They followed. He stopped halfway down the steps. Claire looked past him. Something had changed. A new box, small, wooden, with a spiral carved into the lid. Toby picked it up, opened it. Inside, a child's bracelet, handmade, and a note. She sang at the stone before the storm came. The mountain heard her. It never forgot. Claire read it twice, 3 times. "Then we have to go back to the spiral." Toby didn't argue, just grabbed a flashlight. As they stepped outside, fog curled around the porch. The locket began to hum again. And this time Claire didn't flinch. "If this is yours, we're listening." Claire gripped the bracelet tighter as she walked. It was small, handmade from twine and old buttons with faded pink beads spelling out the name Eliza. Every few steps she had to remind herself to breathe. The trees swallowed sound here. No birds, no insects. Just Boone's steady breath and Toby's quiet steps behind her. The spiral clearing was waiting, same as before. Stone at the center, fog thinning above it, like breath over a mirror. But something was different now. The light. The quiet. Like the mountain had opened one eye. Claire crouched at the spiral, laying the bracelet at its center. "If this is yours," she said softly, "we're listening." She stepped back. Boone lay beside her. Toby held the flashlight, though there was enough ambient glow now that it wasn't needed. The locket at Claire's chest began to hum, not soft this time, but with urgency. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Toby nodded, voice low. "Feels like it's in my jaw." The ground beneath the spiral shuddered. Claire froze. Then, without thinking, she dropped to her knees and began clearing leaves, moss bits of broken twig. The spiral shimmered faintly, as if etched in glass beneath water. Then the center sank. A soft click, and part of the stone dropped inward, revealing a compartment. Inside, a tin box, rusted shut. Toby helped her pull it free. They set it on the grass, hands trembling. Boone stood, ears back, growling again, not at the box, but at the woods behind them. Claire popped the lid. Inside, 3 things: a letter, a key, a lock of hair tied with red thread. Claire picked up the letter, unfolded the fragile paper. Her voice cracked as she read aloud. "To whoever finds this, if you've reached this place, it means the mountain let you. It means you've listened. It means Eliza's story is not over. She didn't drown. She didn't vanish. She was taken by the light. Or perhaps she answered it. I never knew." Harland wouldn't speak of it after that night. He built the cellar. He placed the wards. He blamed the fog, but I think it only mirrored what we refused to see. If the bracelet brought you here, then she's reaching back now. Do not run from her. Do not shut the door. If she stands at your porch, you answer. Not all hauntings are warnings. Some are invitations. Margaret Clare looked up, throat tight. Toby sat on a tree root, face pale. "That girl's still looking for a home," he said. Claire nodded. "She's not the danger. She's the key." He picked up the small key from the tin. "You think this is for the cabin cellar?" Claire shook her head. "No. That lock's old, but not this old. This looks like something for a chest, or a diary, maybe even a music box." Boone barked once loud. Claire jumped. He stared toward the west side of the clearing. "There's something else," she said. "He knows." They moved as one, Toby sweeping the light ahead, while Boone led them past the tree line to a slope Claire had never noticed. Overgrown, hidden behind dense laurel. At the base, an old stone outbuilding, barely larger than a shed, door hanging on one hinge. They stepped inside. It smelled of cedar and thyme. In the corner, a chest, dust-covered, iron-bound. Toby tried the key. It clicked on the first try. The lid creaked open. Inside, dolls, handmade, old clothes, a leather-bound journal, and tucked beneath a blanket, a music box shaped like a swan. Claire reached for the journal. The cover read, Eliza Crane. She sat on the floor and opened it. The first page was childish writing. Crude, looping letters. "Today I found a stone that sings." She flipped forward. "The fog likes names. If you say yours, it listens harder. Boone is not a dog. He's something else. He doesn't eat, but he sleeps beside me." Claire stopped. Boone was hers. Toby sat beside her. Maybe still is. The final entry was different. The handwriting had changed. Still Eliza's, but tighter. Afraid. It came again. The light. "I followed it because I thought it missed me, Mom. I think it was crying." Then a line scrawled across the bottom. "Don't let them bury my voice," Claire whispered. She chose to go, but she didn't mean to disappear. Toby opened the music box. A slow, sweet tune spilled out, fragile and sad. Boone howled. From the trees, movement. Claire stood, turned toward the clearing. The fog had thickened, and in it a figure, small, barefoot. Eliza! The girl took one step forward, then another. She stopped at the edge of the clearing. Claire didn't wait. She stepped forward, music box still playing. Eliza didn't vanish this time. She smiled. Claire held out the journal. Eliza didn't take it, but looked at it, then nodded. Then she looked at Boone. He wagged his tail, just once. Then the girl turned, walking back into the fog, but not alone. Beside her, a second figure, taller, a man. Toby whispered, "My dad." Claire reached out and gripped his hand. The music box slowed to a stop. The fog settled, and the night became still. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Claire stood. "She's not stuck anymore, but I don't think this is over." Toby nodded. "No, I think we've just been let in." Boone barked once, then walked toward the cabin. They followed. As they reached the porch, the cellar door creaked open on its own. Claire didn't flinch. She looked at Toby. Ready to go deeper, he grinned. Not even a little. But yeah, what was buried in silence must be spoken to rest. Claire descended the cellar stairs with slow, deliberate steps. Each creak beneath her feet echoed too long, like the house wasn't just listening, but remembering. The lantern she held threw long shadows across the stone walls, shadows that shifted even when she stood still. Behind her, Toby whispered, "Whatever's down here, it's been waiting a long time." Claire glanced back at him, her voice steady despite the tension curling in her spine. "Then let's not keep it waiting." Boone stayed ahead of them both, his pace, calm tail low, but not tucked. He wasn't afraid. He was leading. The cellar was deeper than Claire remembered. Or maybe the walls had moved. It didn't feel like the same place she'd once seen as just another unfinished basement. Now it was something else. Something older. They reached the bottom. The air grew cooler, damp, earthy, like the breath of something that lived beneath the surface. A stone archway stood where the back wall should have been. Toby blinked. That wasn't here before. Claire stepped toward it. Carved above the arch, barely visible beneath years of dust and mold, were words. What was buried in silence must be spoken to rest. "That's her," Claire whispered. "That's Eliza." Toby exhaled slowly. "No, that's all of them." They stepped through. The chamber beyond was circular walls lined with wooden shelves holding glass jars. Some were filled with dried herbs, others with stones, bits of twine, bone. Not just a root cellar, this had been a ritual space. In the center, a table, old scarred, burn marks along one edge, carved again with the spiral. Claire approached. A journal rested on its surface, protected beneath an oilcloth. She pulled it free and opened the cover. Harland Crane. Toby leaned over her shoulder. "Your great-uncle." Claire nodded. "He built this place." She flipped through the journal. Pages and pages of meticulous handwriting, symbols, observations, weather patterns, animal behavior. But interspersed between those notes were entries that chilled her. She walks the ridge at dusk. Always west. Never speaks. Just watches. Boone did not age. From the night she vanished, he remained. Margaret pretends not to notice, but I do. The mountain has a memory. It gives only to those who remember in return. Claire turned the page. I sealed the threshold. The light wanted more. I gave it names, but Eliza kept hers. She looked at Toby. He fed it. The mountain, whatever lives in it. Toby's mouth tightened. He sacrificed to it. Another page, shakier writing. Margaret left a note in the attic. Said she forgave me. But she never opened the box. Claire felt the weight of that line settle in her ribs. She knew what he'd done, she whispered, but she stayed. Maybe because she thought someone needed to remember, or because she loved him anyway. The spiral on the table began to glow faintly. Boone stepped closer, barked once. From the far end of the chamber came a low groan, stone sliding against stone. They turned. Another doorway had opened. Beyond it, darkness, pure, deep. Claire reached into her pocket, pulled out the Swan music box, wound it once. Soft music drifted through the chamber. The darkness didn't recede, but it listened. And in that pause, Claire stepped through. The next chamber was smaller, square. At its center, an altar of stone and root, like the mountain itself, had grown up through the floor, etched into the altar. Names. Dozens. Some scratched out. Some repeated. Claire found hers. Claire Shaw, then another Toby Crane, and beneath it, Eliza Crane, and one more, Margaret Shaw. She stepped back. It's a ledger. Toby's voice was hollow. It's a tally. Claire touched her name. It wasn't carved deep, like it could still be removed, or deepened. Then she saw it, the final name, etched lower, almost hidden beneath a knot of root. Harland Crane. Next to it, a symbol, not the spiral, a mark like a broken chain. Toby stepped forward. He tried to break it. Claire looked at him. No. He failed to. She turned toward the music box. Its tune faded. The room fell silent. Then Boone barked again, urgent. Behind them, the spiral doorway began to close. Claire grabbed the journal and ran. They barely made it through before the stone sealed shut. Back in the chamber, the spiral on the table was pulsing. Claire dropped the journal. It's not just about remembering. It's about unbinding. Toby looked around. What do we have to do? Claire's voice was clear now. Certain. We break the chain. Not just for Eliza. For all of them. She looked at the shelves. The jars. The remnants of rituals long past. This wasn't protection, she said. It was containment. Fear disguised as tradition. Boone walked to the center of the room, sat, waited. Claire joined him. Toby followed. She placed the music box on the spiral, wound it again. As the music played, Claire spoke aloud. We're not afraid of your names. We're not your secret keepers. We're your witnesses. Your story doesn't end in this cellar. The spiral glowed brighter, then cracked. The light that poured out wasn't harsh. It was warm. Like memory, like dawn. And from it, a voice. Eliza's voice. You listened. Then another, older. Margaret. You stayed. And then Harland. You chose. The cellar trembled. The air rushed upward through the house into the trees, like the mountain was exhaling for the first time in decades. Claire stood. The glow faded, and the spiral on the floor was no longer a prison. It was a path. Above on the porch, wind chimes began to ring. Toby turned to Claire. "What happens now?" She met his gaze. "We open the house." Claire stood barefoot on the porch just after sunrise, the sky a soft wash of lavender and gold above the pines. The air was sharp with dew, and Boone sat quietly at her side, ears flicking at the gentle rustle of wind through the leaves. Everything was still but not silent. There was a kind of humming in the land now, subtle like the earth itself had started breathing again. Inside, Toby was moving furniture. Not hurriedly, not with purpose, just making space. It had been 2 weeks since the cellar. 2 weeks since the spiral cracked. 2 weeks since Eliza smiled. The house had changed. Not in any physical sense, no sudden repairs or magic fixings. But the energy was different. The floorboards didn't creak like warnings anymore. The shadows didn't clutch. The cabin wasn't a place that held something back. It had become a place that let things in. Claire looked out at the trail leading down toward the road. No one was coming, not yet. But someone would. She turned to Boone. "They'll come when they're ready." He blinked once. Agreed. Toby appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of old books. "I found more of Margaret's journals. Some are dreams. Some read like recipes. One's just full of names." Claire took them gently, setting them on a shelf by the window. "We'll organize them later. They deserve to be read. Even the ones that don't make sense, especially those." She walked into the kitchen. The kettle was already steaming. It was strange, the quiet. Not empty. Full in a way. Like this place had always been meant for listening. They had spent the first few days recording everything, sketching the spiral rooms, mapping the chambers, copying the names. Then came the work of cleaning. Not to erase, but to honor. They had left the jars on the shelves, but labeled them with what they could identify. The rest stayed as they were. Claire pulled open the drawer near the stove. Inside, folded neatly, was Eliza's last journal entry, the one she had copied by hand and read every night before bed. "Don't let them bury my voice." She had thought about that a lot. What it meant to have your story end without your choosing. What it meant to scream into silence and be forgotten. Outside, Boone barked once. Footsteps on gravel. Claire stepped to the door. A woman approached. Maybe late 50s. Worn jeans, gray hoodie hair pulled back in a long braid. She walked slowly as if waiting to be turned away. Claire smiled. "Are you looking for someone?" The woman looked at her for a long time. "I heard there was a house, up in the trees, with a porch that faces east." "There is. They say you found something here." Claire nodded. "Not something. Someone." The woman stepped forward. "My sister vanished when we were girls. Everyone said she ran away. But I always wondered, the way the woods went silent after, the way our dog barked for hours the next night. No one listened." Claire opened the door wide. "We're listening now." The woman stepped inside. The kettle whistled. Toby greeted her with a nod, then poured 3 mugs of tea. Boone stayed by the doorway watching the trees. That day, 3 more people came. One with a picture of her grandfather, another with a name etched in the back of a family Bible. One came just to sit in silence. Claire let them all in. That night they lit the lanterns again. They placed a smooth stone on the spiral table for each story told. Not as offerings, as anchors. It became a rhythm, day by day, word by word. Claire's cabin became a waypoint, a hush house for the forgotten, for the haunted. Not a place to exercise fear, but to witness it, and it gave back. On the 7th night, a girl arrived, maybe 16, didn't give a name, sat at the edge of the spiral table and cried for nearly an hour. No one asked why. When she was ready, she said, "My mom used to dream about a song, said it came from the trees. Every year on her birthday, she swore she could hear it again." Claire wound the music box. The girl gasped. "That's it!" Boone barked, then howled once, and something in the air shifted again. Weeks passed, then months. The journal pages multiplied. The ledger of names grew, but it was never heavy. It was honest. On the first day of snow, Claire stood again on the porch. Toby brought out mugs, handing her one with both hands wrapped around it. The trees were white with frost. Smoke curled from the chimney. The spiral table inside glowed softly with candlelight. Toby looked at her. "Do you ever wonder if it's done, if it's finished?" Claire smiled. "I think it's only finished when no one's left to speak." He nodded. "Then we keep speaking." She looked down at Boone, who had laid beside her feet, tail thumping gently. "This isn't a ghost story," she said softly. "No," Toby asked. She shook her head. "It's a remembrance story, a choosing story. We get to choose what's remembered and what's forgotten. And what about us? We'll be remembered by the ones who find this place after us, who sit on this porch, who read these names, who listen." Toby let the silence stretch. "Then let's build something worth remembering." Claire raised her mug in a toast. To Eliza, to Margaret, to the ones who stayed, and the ones who found their way back. Boone barked once. The wind answered, and the cabin, warm and steady, waited for the next name to be spoken.